All right, if we want to, I'm really happy that everyone's talking and visiting and networking and chatting, but we're going to keep going so we can stay on track. It's me again, Linda Finley. I'm going to say just a couple words about the Twin Cities Business Architecture Forum. I know I covered that earlier today, but I wanted to make sure that anyone that's interested, aspiring to, curious about acting as a business architect knows that you're welcome to come in and sit in at our community of practice. Our next meeting, we meet the third Tuesday every other month. So we have flyers back there on the registration table now if you want to pick up the information. The way that we're structured is that we have 6 sponsors that are all there. There's no financial aspect to our community. The sponsors are the ones that make the in-lieu contribution of hosting a meeting once a year. And so every time we meet at one of their locations. So by definition, we end up nicely dispersed, mostly on the west side, but still nicely dispersed from downtown to Cargill, as far as, and Express Scripts, as far as distribution of meetings. So it is nice to get some of that variability and people can find their way, some of them downtown, some of them not. Anyway, the next session is Warwick. Still here? Warwick is presenting on Tuesday, the 18th, so in a few days. And he'll be talking about the journey. So every time what we do is between the host organization and the board, the TCBF board, we create, we come up with the presentation idea, and then it's a 2-hour thing. We have a half-hour social time, and then the rest of the time is just information sharing and networking and discussing and all that. They're good meetings. They're, like I said before, we have good attendance. We have a lot of the board members in the room today, a lot of members of the community here that I'm very familiar with, many of you, and I'm happy you're here. But so Warwick is going to be talking on Tuesday about end-to-end the process he went through on a multi-year engagement with a company in Minnesota. One of the questions we get from the business architects who are emerging or aspiring, it's kind of a newer thing that's getting really its legs under it. A lot of times we get a question of what do I do when I start this thing? I do this first, second, third. What's the order? What's the thing? And the answer is usually, well, you have to think and decide what your tool you're going to pull out of your rucksack when and apply and know what to use according to where the organization's at, where the culture's at, where the leaders are at, and kind of what needs to be done in the organization. And it's really more, it's not as structured. It's not as follow the list, check off the boxes kind of a thing. So what Warwick's going to do is take us through his whole process end to end and tell us what he did and what he used and what tools he used and the modeling he did and so on. And so it will give us a whole life cycle. And I think is that accurate, Warwick? Did I just say what you're actually going to do? Oh, he's moving around the room. He's over there now. Well, if he wasn't going to do that, he is going to do that now. But anyway, so that is going to happen on Tuesday. I think it's going to be really interesting because it gives us a chance to see how end-to-end it was done, and we can ask questions and ask why, and then we can apply our own thinking and our own process to that. So please do join that if you can. And there's information about the LinkedIn site, and then ask many of us. There's flyers back there, as I said. And then the next meeting will be in January and hosted by Metro State. And like I said, they go every 2 months. So please do join us if you want. Now I get the pleasure of flying right into an introduction of a friend of mine who's actually presented for us at the TCBF a couple of times. And he's actually done a drop into our business architecture certificate program class. I try to arrange a social visit at a time when he can drop in and just wax poetic at our class. He's always great to have him. He, as I said, he has been a presenter at TCBF. Thrivent had him in the first time, and he broke the 100-person mark. He's always a great draw, as you saw earlier today if you were in Jeff's presentation. Jeff works for Excellair. He's the Vice President of Business and Technology Strategy for Excellair. And as I said earlier, he was the first one to sign on with Excellair to support and sponsor this event, and actually got our feet under us when we were starting to plan. So we owe a lot to Jeff and Acceler for the early adoption and support of this event. I don't have much more. I think a lot of you were in his presentation this morning. I'm not going to reread the bio that we gave you then, but just to say, former Forester, currently Acceler, world leader, big thinker, awesome friend, Jeff Scott.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Wow, sounds weird from up here when you're doing this. Just kind of out of curiosity, how many of you in here know me from Forrester or the blog or the Twin Cities Business Architecture thing or something else? Oh, okay, good. You guys all know what you're in for then. For the rest of you, first let me say that my mission in the professional side of my life is to create successful architects. And I've been working on that for almost 20 years. And I didn't say create good architectures, because I certainly can do models and all those kind of things, and I create a few models occasionally that I think are interesting anyway, but that's not what's going to help you be successful. So my model is to create successful architects. The problem with that model is, the way to do that from my perspective is, I want to make you think. I want to make you think differently about what your role is, about what your opportunity is, about where you've been and where you're going, and that doesn't always feel good. Some of you are going to be very frustrated with some of the things I'm going to say. Apologize in advance. Some of you are going to adamantly disagree with me on some things, and I'm happy for you to do that, with one caveat. You got to think about it. Because what I see a lot is we take positions and we quit thinking about why we have those positions. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk about is that kind of stuff. I love this quote. The hard part is not the new innovative stuff, it's get the old junk out of your head. Because we all are rolling around here with a bunch of old junk. So I'm going to jump in, I think. Yes, I am. So I'm going to start with some things that I think most of you will agree with. So I'll start with the easy stuff. How's that? We'll move to the harder stuff in a minute. The first one is, I think architects are really, really smart men and women. Boys, girls, however you want to put that. We do not take the slacker guys and say, hey, you're not doing anything anyway, so just go over there to the architects and live out your life. That's not what we do. This group, I am fully confident that the people in this room, not knowing anything, and maybe a few of you do, about rocket science or orbital theory or any of that stuff, could put a man on Mars probably in the next 3 years if I just turned you loose and said, go do that. A bunch of smart people. The second thing is, we have more latitude to create our job the way we want to than almost anybody else. And the reason I say that is it's very likely you're working for somebody who has never done your job, particularly if you're a business architect, and today I do most of my work with business architects. But largely, we've been able to start this stuff, and we're working for people that are clueless about how to do it. And if you think in most jobs, if you're a project manager, you work for somebody that's managed projects for 20 years. They're an expert. They tell you how to do it. They do all that stuff, and that's good, and that's bad, too. If you're a business analyst, it's the same way. If you're a hotshot coder, the guy that leads your team is usually a hotter shot coder than you are. But we get a lot of latitude, so we have almost a green field to do this. We also have a lot of time. Now, I know you may not feel like it's a lot of time, but the fact is, if you compare what we do to what all of our brethren do in IT, it's an enormous amount of time. Think about the guys who manage the servers. Server's down. How much time they got? Oh, about 5 seconds before the phone calls start. Oh, we got to do some maintenance on the server. We got to take it down, bring it back up. How much time you got? Very small amount of time. Projects, they all have a deadline, and people are very pushy about those deadlines. You can't take forever, but you do have a moderate amount of time to make this thing work. And the last part here is your organization needs you to succeed. They need critical thinkers. They need a much clearer path to strategy. They need people who can manage transformation. They need all of that stuff, and they need it desperately. So we know all this, and yet we got the brain power. We got the opportunity to create this stuff any way we want to create it. We got enough time to do most of what we want to do, and yet, by and large, we still struggle. And the question you should be asking yourself, now I know you don't struggle, I'm sorry. I know all of you guys are perfect and you have great teams and you have none of these problems. So I'm talking about all those guys out there that don't live in Minnesota, okay? The question we should be asking ourselves is, why do we struggle with this? Because we have all these opportunities to be great and we're still struggling. So let me give you some of the hard news. Give you the fun stuff, right? Okay, so now I'll give you the hard news. The first thing is for what I think of as enterprise architects, so that's the technical architecture guys largely, but the enterprise architects, 40% of those guys have pretty much failed. I mean, not the current guys in the role, but 40% of those initiatives have failed. That data is pretty well known by Forrester and Gartner. They don't talk about it a whole lot, but they all know it. That's a fact. I didn't make that one up, so that's a fact. 30% are struggling for success. They're working hard, they're trying to do good stuff, and they're doing great PowerPoint, and they'll tell you they're actually doing pretty good. And then I think about 20% are doing what I think of as journeyman work, good, solid architecture work, and go home every night feeling good about what they did. And about 10% really are fulfilling what I think of as the promise of architecture. We're really going to make a difference. We're going to change the way the organization thinks about strategy, about technology, about how we implement it. We're going to really do great stuff. Those guys are doing it. Now you can argue, oh, maybe that's 15%. Okay, but you're not ever going to convince me it's 25. I mean, I've talked to thousands, and I'm not exaggerating that at all, thousands of architects in the last 10 years. I have a pretty good perspective of where the landscape is, and that's about where it is for them. Business architects, where I spend most of my time today, it's worse. Maybe it's because that's where I work. I don't know. More than 60% have failed. That's a pretty big number. And by the way, that number is in Forrester's research. I didn't make that up. And again, they don't talk about it very much. It's buried in the research, but you can find it and you can calculate it yourself. It's there. About 20% are struggling for success. 15% are the journeyman kind of guys doing pretty good work. And maybe 5% are really fulfilling the need. Now, I don't think this is all that bad compared to enterprise architects, because we've only been at this seriously for maybe 6, 8 years. You enterprise architects, we've been at that for a profession for at least 20 years. So you've had a little more time to get better. But it's pretty rare, by the way, in enterprise architecture space to go into a company that's starting an enterprise architecture practice and start their very first one. I mean, you go in and it's like, oh yeah, this is our second time, or our third time, or our fourth time of trying to get this right. This is pretty much where the profession is. So here's a question for you. It's not rhetorical. I want you to answer it. Which is harder? Building architectural models, so that's capability models, roadmaps, whatever the views are that you create as an architect. What's harder? Building them or selling them? And by selling them, I mean getting the organization behind them, to embrace them, to use them on a day-to-day basis, to believe in them. That is the promise of what we're doing. So which of those is harder? How many of you think building the models is the hard part and selling is the easy part? How many of you think building is the hard part? Okay. I just want to point something out here. You're a bunch of architects. You don't agree on anything. And you just agreed to that statement. And in fact, with roughly 200 people that are in here, I have asked that question to 2,000 architects. They all agree. It's phenomenal. It's a movement. So here's the question: where are you spending your time? Most of you, okay, not me. I got a screen, had a screen. Let's see. Thank you. Okay, I can tap. It's raining over here, which probably has something to do with it. Here's the problem. We're all spending our time getting better and better and better at doing models. It's like, oh yeah, man, if I add 3 more colors and draw these lines here, then everybody's going to get it and they're going to go for it. The challenge is over there at getting the organization behind it. So where should you be spending your time? Here's the deal. There is not one living soul in this room that cannot create an absolutely top-notch, excellent architectural model. If you're a technical architect, you can do it. If you're a business architect, you can do it. That's not the question. The question is, can you sell it? Can you get your organization behind it? And that's the challenge. And so when you start thinking of it that way, now you got to start thinking about what are the skills I need to do that. So first, let's talk about what those challenges are. This is from Forrester. This question, by the way, was asked to, really interesting way they did this. These were professionals who report unsuccessful attempts at business architecture and look at what the top 3 challenges were. Cultural, politics, corporate champion, visibility. Nobody said bad models. I don't even think models are it's not even on the list. Okay. Same question asked to successful architects, which is what made you successful? Oh, culture, champions, visibility. There's no models up there. That's not what they say. You getting the drift where this is going? Sort of catching on to the deal? So what's going on here with us? You may or may not like this particular picture, but this is what I came up with when I was at Forrester as kind of the foundational, basic picture of architecture model. We got some governance, some principles, current state, future state, reference architecture, some solution architects that hopefully do something. And that's more or less, I'm going to show you a couple of models. This is one of the ways we believe the world works, and we would be dead wrong about that. Dead wrong. Point number 1 about this is in the way the world moves today, you haven't got time to build out a full set of reference models. I heard John Zachman talk 2 weeks ago. I love John. He's in love with my wife, so we always have great conversations. He's still talking about you can't change anything until you do the entire diagramming. So stop everything you're doing for 10 years. Go do all the diagramming. Now you can come up, now you can do something. Guys, the world does not work this way. It's got to be iterative. It's got to be evolutionary. The one I love up here that's just so insane is governance. I've been talking to architects about this for 10 years, and I haven't changed anybody's opinion, so I haven't hit the right model. I got to have 3 more colors to what I'm talking about. Here's the deal. Architects tell me consistently, yes, we have a governance program. No, it does not work. It doesn't work because we don't have enough sponsorship. It doesn't work because it doesn't have any teeth in it. We don't have enough authority. Blah. There's a lot of reasons it does not work. Okay, now, Gardner, Forrester, and all those architects that tell me it doesn't work, they insist that's a best practice. Now let me tell you what a best practice is. You do it in your company and your industry. You do it in your company and industry. You do it in your company and industry, and it all works. So I'm sitting here like, wow, oh, you guys can do it, it works. It'll probably work for me. That's a best practice. What do you call it if you do it and it doesn't work? And you do it and it doesn't work? And you do it and it doesn't work? Anything come to mind? Like worst practice? Guys, you got to think about this. We got a model here that's somewhat dysfunctional. And the problem is this is a paradigm in the way we think. So everything that goes through our heads fall into these kind of models. Here's another example. I saw this one at a conference last week. In fact, I put this slide in after I saw this. People are still talking about enterprise architecture. They stack it up a little differently. It's business architecture, application architecture, information, infrastructure, and yeah, we throw in some stuff for the security guys because we know you guys are important and we love you and we don't want to do that job, but we'll give you some credit. And maybe some other stuff, but that's our model of enterprise architecture. Guys, that is an IT architecture. That is IT-centric. That is a model that says IT is the center of the universe. I got news for you. IT's Pluto. It's not even Mars. This would be a more rational model of an enterprise architecture view. I've got a strategy architecture, a people architecture, a financial architecture. I don't even have one view of technology because, by the way, you say you're technology guys. There's a whole bunch of technology that has nothing to do with digital. I got airplanes. I got robots. I got all kinds of stuff. Where's the architecture for those things? Where's the people architecture? What are we doing here? So if we want to be enterprise architects, then we've got to be enterprise guys. And I'm not trying to promote this as the right model. I'm just saying the other one's not the right model. This would be a much fuller view. I don't see architects talking about this kind of model. And oh, by the way, despite the fact that you might think IT is the most important thing in the world, let me point out, people are much more important than technology. I know you don't like to hear that. I know you might not even believe that. Just think about this for a while. You got to have people. You could get by without technology for a little while. And money would be the second most important thing. So we're not even in the top one or two. You got to have people, you got to have money. Then you can have some technology to do something. Who knows? Anybody recognize this figure? You're going to show your age if you do. I'm the oldest guy in the room. Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, okay, another old guy, sorry. This is Pogo. Pogo, it's a little hard to tell here, is a possum. And Pogo lives in the Okefenokee Swamp. And Pogo was a comic strip character in the 60s who spewed forth all kinds of philosophy from the swamp. Now, I don't get the possum deal, but that was what was. His most famous quote, "We have met the enemy, and he is us. He's not out there, he's here." And so part of my message around where we are in architecture is we are the enemy. It's not out there. It is not that the culture is wrong. It's not that I'm not reporting to the CEO. Those are just bumps for you to overcome. Sure, if somebody just said, magically you can do that, would that be great? Maybe. Actually not. I can go into a whole spiel about that. This is us. Why? Because we want change to happen our way. We don't want to look at this messy stuff out here. We want it to happen our way. We ignore, and I mean almost completely ignore culture and context. Oh, that's a problem. I'm just going to put my head in the sand. I'm not going to deal with it because I can't change it. You can't change it, but you can deal with it. We think technology is the center of the universe. We think about efficiency more than effectiveness, and that's kind of a burden we have for most of us who have been in IT. We want to control versus collaborate. That's back to that governance thing. What's governance all about? It's about control. Oh, by the way, here's the interesting thing I ask guys around culture. Which would you rather have? A highly authoritarian command control management style, or would you rather have an empowered management style? Who votes for command and control? What? You don't want that? Let me give you a hint. Here's the problem. You got to think this stuff through. No, there's another problem. I don't know. I keep losing. Maybe that'll come back. Maybe it won't. The problem is, where does governance work? Governance works in command and control organizations that define decision rights, that are very clear about all that. You want to have a governance mechanism that works? Don't be in an empowered organization, because that's not where it's going to work. An empowered organization gives people a lot of freedom to do stuff. What you need there is collaboration. We focus more on models than actual results. We want it to be easy for us. Guess what? Your job is not easy. It's not going to be easy. It's never going to be easy. Get over it. And the last part to this is, by and large, we would rather be right than successful. My model is correct. It is orthogonally obtuse. I think that's probably right. It's canonically correct. It's all these things. We spend all this time. Coming over here in a plane, when I flew over here yesterday, I read this article that was a bunch of architects who were trying to resolve the difference between BPM and business architecture. And they did this by aligning the models that those two use. Okay? I am sure that was very correct stuff. was 34 pages of very correct stuff. And frankly, after about page 6, I couldn't understand a damn thing they were saying. And I mean, I kind of know this stuff, and I couldn't figure it out. We want to be correct. So, if that's the problem, what are the people who are really succeeding, those guys in that 5%, 10%, that are really changing the world, doing great stuff? What are they doing that looks different than the average people? These are the guys who are building sustainable practices that can move forward and do stuff. So let's just look at it. The very first thing is they recognize reality. Reality is ugly. It smells bad. It feels bad. It is what is. So things like business is driven, by the way, by financial objectives, not beautiful models. It's all about money. It's all about making things happen. There's never enough money to do it right. Remember, we want to be right, but our companies don't have enough money to do it right. We don't have enough time to do it right. And people trust who and what they know. You want influence in your company? You want to be able to direct the flow of information? You want to get more money? You want to engage and get a great architecture out there? People got to trust you. How do they trust you? They got to know you. Or you're getting out and talking to people, making sure that that happens. The other interesting thing that they do is they forget the theory, they do what works. When we go to school, what we learn is a bunch of theory. When we go to class, we learn a bunch of theory. I do a lot of capability modeling. I understand the theory behind capability modeling. I understand the way you name them. I understand the way that you decide what's in Tier 1 and Tier 2 and Tier 3. I know all that really, really well. I've been writing about it. I've been teaching it. I've been using it. I got it. Let me tell you what the number one criteria of a successful capability model is. Number one criteria is the business execs resonate with it. It doesn't matter what color it is. It doesn't matter how many levels it is. It doesn't matter how you name things. It doesn't matter how you organize things. What matters is, do they like it? Can they use it? Will they use it? And if you want it to be correct, you're very likely not to get that buy-in. The other thing they do is they solve the right problem. There's a whole bunch of symptoms running around here that we go after because they're kind of the easy money. We're not really solving the big problems. And the nice thing about symptoms, by the way, is when you solve them, they come back. You can solve them again. And again. And again. What you want to do is figure out what are the big problems. What is the culture and context that's driving this? Because even though there are a few people who are going to talk about this in just a minute, but most people come to work to do good stuff. So why do we have these problems? Why are they there? I mean, do you come to work saying, today, what problem can I just shove into this deal? Is that what you do? You think people do that? Actually, a few do. We're going to talk about them in a minute. You don't. What happens is the culture and context that you're working in creates these problems. People are trying to do a good job. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the way. So if you're not dealing with that, you don't have to change it, but you have to deal with it. It's going to be hard to do that. The other thing is to make others successful. This is so amazing to me. I've been watching this phenomenon for 20 years, literally 20 years. Architects spend a tremendous amount of time trying to find people to help make them successful. How can you help me? I need more support from you executive guys. You need to help me be successful. I need these project guys to line up and do the right thing. You need to help me get the architecture out there. That isn't the way you do it. That's totally backwards. The way you're successful and the way the guys I know are successful is they help others succeed. And what happens when you help others succeed? They help you. That's the way the world works, guys. Corporate works that way. Your home works that way. Your friends work that way. You help others. They help you. But you got to start first. Is that fair? Maybe not. I don't know. Is it right? Maybe not. I don't care. It's the way. And you have to deal with culture and context. You don't have to change it, but you got to be willing to deal with it. Probably can't see on the chart there, but Gallup Research did a poll. I think it was 2 years ago. And here's what they found. This was over thousands and thousands of people in hundreds and hundreds of companies. 30% of the people in your organization come to work engaged. What does that mean? That means they want to do a good job. They want to move the company forward. They're going to try to do the right thing. They're going to worry about doing the right thing. They're on board. 30%. That's it. And you're lucky, I think, if you get 30. I think most places I've been, that's been more like 10, 15. They say 30, okay. 52% are unengaged. What does that mean? That means they come to work, they punch the clock, and they do their job, and that's all they do. Frankly, they don't care whether you make your stock price. They don't care whether you make a profit. They don't care any of that stuff. They just want to come in, put their head down, do their work, good stuff. You can get them to do more, but you got to coach them. You got to excite them. You got to do something to motivate them. They're not naturally motivated. That's 52%. What about the other 18? What are they doing? They are the actively disengaged. They are coming to work to screw you up every day. You can't make this stuff up. So, what are you going to do with those guys? This is the world you're in. So, at best, 30% of the people are willing to listen to what you have to say and say, wow, that might be a good idea. The rest of them are not. You got to sell them, you got to cajole them, you got to do something with them, but you're not going to get them there without doing a lot of work. In fact, when I was managing, I came up with a management rule that I teach, checking where we are here, that I teach in my influence class. And here's the rule. I call it the 20-60-20 rule. And I manage a lot of teams, and this is how it works. 20% of the people will go with you if you just pick a direction and go. That's all you have to do. Pick a direction, go. 20%, maybe it's 30. They want an answer. They want a direction. They'll follow you. If you just show them you're in charge and you're going to do it, they'll go. 60%, you got to convince. You've got to influence them. You've got to show them. You've got to do the work to get them on board. You've got to sell them on what's going on. And you can, and they will follow you if you engage them. The last 20% would rather go straight to hell than go with you. Why? Oh, you're too old. You couldn't possibly understand this stuff. You're too young. You couldn't possibly have enough experience to do this stuff. You've been in the company too long and you're too set in your ways. Oh, you're brand new to the company and you just don't know anything about how the way it works here. It doesn't matter. They're not going. They're not going to go. So what does that tell you, by the way, in terms of getting things done? It says, one, don't spend your time with those guys, and don't spend your time with the first set either. Here is what we largely do. We spend a lot of our time trying to convince that 20% that are not going to go, because they're the vocal guys. They're the guys that are like, oh, this stuff's crazy. These guys don't know what they're talking about. I know more about technology than you know, all this stuff. So they're the crazy guys. And we spend a lot of time because we want to convince them. Then when we get tired of that, we go back to the 20% that will follow us anywhere because it feels so good to talk to somebody that says, yeah, isn't this good? And we ignore the middle, which is where all the action is, and can do stuff. These guys also take risks. And when I talk about risk, I'm talking about professional risk. The way that our organizations work is almost everything drives for excellence. Nobody wants an average project manager. Certainly don't want bad ones. But we don't want average. We want good ones. Nobody wants an average Java programmer. We want great ones. And what do we do with that? Well, we educate people. We let you come to conferences like this and maybe even pay for it. We do all kinds of stuff to get you to move up to excellence. And that would be true, except for you. It doesn't work that way for you. It doesn't work that way for innovators. It doesn't work that way for change agents. It doesn't work that way for transformers. It doesn't work that way for strategists. I think those are all things that describe what you do. Because as soon as you start challenging the status quo of the organization, it pushes back. People just don't like different all that much. And what you're doing is coming in with something very different than the average person thinks about. If that were not true, you'd be wildly successful. It's true. And what happens is culture, ego, rules, processes, all this stuff tries to push you back to the middle. And so what happens is all that pushes down. So what does that mean? What's the takeaway here? The takeaway is if you don't do much at all, you're at risk. And if you do really, really good, you're at risk. This is why people get hired to come in and be change agents and get fired the next year. I want you to change us, but not that much. No. I want you to really get things changed, just going, but not like that. No. I was running a very innovative group. We were doing all kinds of wild things that even today people can't quite grasp how it all worked. And I was talking to a new CIO that had come in about how we did it and why he should sign in to this. And this is really good stuff, and you really want to do what we're doing. And he was older than me, a good bit older, and he almost patted me on the shoulder. It was that kind of thing. It's like, Jeff, we all know you're getting the right results. You're doing it the wrong way. Not much connection in his mind between, if you want to get those results, you've got to do it different than the way you're doing it because you're not getting the right results. But no, it wasn't good enough to get the right results. So here's some attributes, I think, of successful architects. One is they have a sound understanding of business concepts and models. And by that, I mean not process. Who cares about process? What I want to know is, how do we make money? How do we get customers? Who are our customers? Who are our next customers? How do we do product design? Why do we do product design the way we do it? Why do we manage the way we manage? Where are these guys up here empowering everybody to do all this crazy stuff, and I want to control them? What are the business fundamentals and concepts? The ability to think about process without technology, that's even hard for business guys to do, by the way. You put a bunch of business guys in the room and you ask them to describe their process, the very first thing you do is, well, this system does this, and then this system does this. They know how to listen and listen really well. This was fascinating to me. When I was at Forrester, I did a lot of research. I would ask enterprise architects, what are the success criteria for being successful? And the number one thing that popped up very consistently was communication. And when I started talking to business architects, I asked the same question, and what came up was listening. And just think about the difference between those. I am communicating. I am telling you what I think. I am telling you what I believe. I am telling you stuff. It's all about tell. It's about I'm going to tell you. And that is the way most architects think. It's all about, can I take this concept thing of architecture and explain it to you poor dumb business guys? That's the tell model. That's the communication model. What I found is the guys that are really successful listen. They listen between the lines. They understand what's not being said. They try to figure out why is that not being said. They try to play back to the organization what it's not saying to kind of solve this stuff. So really powerful thing. They're really strong in consulting. I'm a firm believer in architects and strategists and all these guys to have a kind of a cult consulting model. There are different ways to do it. But I think you have to have a really strong consulting mindset. This programmatic view of the world is very hard to get in place. They do have a strategic point of view, and by that, I mean we're not passive. The guys that are really successful can push. I'm not saying they have a different view about what the company should be doing. I'm saying they have a point of view about what good strategy is. They have a point of view about what they've been hearing, that I heard this, I think it means this, and they can push back and challenge. And they can innovate on the fly. So if this model's not working, I'll do this model. And in fact, one of the other big things I see in the organizations that don't do well, back to that, let's spend our time doing modeling, is we do something, it didn't work. Oh, let's do it again and just be louder. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, let's just get louder. We keep trying the same things. And I think you all should know this, the famous Einstein quote, if you do if you do the same things expecting different results, you're crazy. But yet we do that all the time. And good at design thinking. We've sort of moved away, I think, from design thinking in architecture in general. We've gotten much more into engineering, and I think that design thinking is where it is. We need to be a catalyst for change. And by that, I mean we need to be agitate and stir things up. If architecture to me is all about change, it's all about driving change, it's about making things happen. Well, if that's true, you got to be a catalyst for change. Oh, back to the risk thing, that means you got to take a lot of risk. Are you ready to do that? So just a couple of very quick words about sustainability in general. So those are the kind of things I see in architecture teams, both technical, business architecture teams that seem to be sustaining. Just kind of we do have enough time, I think, for this. Just a kind of a different view of the world here for a minute. So this is a little off track, but I thought it was an important point. one of the things I see with these guys is they have huge aspirations. They just don't want to do really good technology stuff. They don't want to implement a service bus. They don't want to create a great capability model. The guys who are really good at sustaining, they have a much bigger view of the world, and they're trying to create an organization as a high-performance organization. They may not term it that way, but that seems to be what's underlying their drive here, which is very different than a productive organization. And just as kind of another teaser here, look at a highly productive organization. How do you get there? You provide a lot of structure. There's a lot of detailed processes, and we are constantly working on those. Roles are very clearly defined. Specialization is what it's all about. I mean, how do we make assembly lines work? Everybody, I turn this screw. It's what I do all day. I turn this screw. I turn this screw. At the end of the day, it's all about to get the job done. High-performance organizations are totally different. And I'll give you a key about high-performance organizations. The chances that more than 2 or 3 of you have ever seen one are doubtful. And I can say that because I've been working for well over 30 years, and I had the privilege of being in a high-performance organization for exactly 3 years. I saw what it was. It's incredibly different. I did a presentation on that earlier this year, and I couldn't describe it. And I still don't know a good way to describe it because it is so radically different, it's hard to imagine. But what goes on there is we have much wider and clearer boundaries about what we can do, so we can be empowered, so we can do new and different things, and it's okay. We don't put a lot of process or role definition in place. We want things to be in flux. It's all about learning and changing. And at the end of the day, what people are saying is I'm contributing to something bigger than myself. I'm not just punching a clock. It's engaged employees. You can build all the models you want to, and you can do all kinds of technical stuff. You can do all of that. What really moves the needle for your company is engaged employees. So if you can engage your guys in following your architectural lead, if you can engage your guys in building better systems, if you can engage the organization and get them moving, you've really done something. The other thing that happens here is this. So back to that thinking big thing. When I look at sustainable practices, this is the model I see. There's breadth of how much impact do we have across the organization, and there's depth. How much impact are we having up and down? And it turns out that the highly sustainable guys are all over the organization. They're not just working with executives, they're working at the very frontline management guys, helping them understand strategy, helping them implement it, helping them get the right technologies in place, all that kind of stuff, and they're working broadly across the organization. The third leg of this is growing strategic impact. So think about what defines success for your company? Growth. It's all about growth. Sustainable profits, nobody cares. That's a big yawn. Nobody cares if your company can deliver sustainable profits. What do they care about? They care about growth. And in fact, if you look out there at a whole bunch of companies, there are a whole bunch of companies out there that have no profit and a ton of growth. Think Twitter, those kind of guys. Have very little profit, tons of growth. People love them. So it's all about growth. What is that for you? If you are going to be sustainable, then you have to grow. And it's not about growing the number of products you have. It's about growing your impact across the organization. How broad, how deep, and how important. So the strategy stuff is how important. For those of you who read my blog, you know that I kind of always end with the bottom line. So here's the bottom line, I think, to all this stuff. If you're not growing, you're dying. So if you're sitting where you were a year ago, you should really be questioning yourself about what's going on. The top three the top three critical success factors to winning are influence, influence, and influence. It's all about influence. I can have the worst models in the world, but be influential, and I'm going to win every time. Technology is not the center of the universe. Architects design new worlds. Engineers just do the plumbing. And frequently they're relegated to cleaning out the pipes, which, if you've ever done that, you'll know that's a dirty job to do. But I think the thing here that I'm trying to say is there's a whole design world out here about working at a design level, and that's what we see that's what excites the business is the design stuff. The plumbing stuff, I hire a plumber to do that. I can hire an engineer to do that. Value is in the eye of the customer. At the end of the day, whoever your customer is, it's not what you think. Low-hanging fruit is bitter. Solve the right problems. I love this. Every time I talk to a new architecture team, The first question every single one asked me, I had it asked twice in the conference 2 weeks ago, what's the low-hanging fruit we can get to show our value? I'm like, low-hanging fruit? Man, what are you saying? You're an architect, man. You don't go after low-hanging fruit. You go after the stuff on the top of the tree. Just think about this for a minute. What is it that frustrates you with the business guys? What are they doing? They're making short-term decisions. They're making tactical decisions. They're making independent decisions from all their peers, right? Is this not the stuff that frustrates the daylights out of us? What is that? Low-hanging fruit. What frustrates you about all those guys out there is they're going after the low-hanging fruit, and they're not going after the big stuff. You're never going to change them by doing a bunch of low-hanging fruit stuff. You got to figure out how to get past that. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner. And pretty much everybody in the strategy world understands this. You've got to figure out how to make this play. And in fact, something like, what is the number? 70% of executives believe, get this, I think it's 70%, maybe 70% of executives believe culture is more important than strategy or operating model. Think about that. That's a powerful statement. And I think at the end of the day, to succeed, you want to be so good that those guys can't ignore you. And I mean, the bottom line of the message for me is that there's a whole bunch of different things we can do. How do you succeed? You succeed by being so good that all the naysayers just can't, whether they like you or don't like you. Just like I talked about this CIO. He didn't like what we were doing, but he couldn't ignore us because we were producing so much good stuff, he had to sign up and use it, despite the fact he didn't like the way we did it. And at the end of the day, I think the mantra is think big, really, really, really big. Start small. Don't stay there very long. That's the key to the low-hanging fruit stuff. You can't stay there very long. You can eat one apple and you got to move and go fast. And it's the move fast part that we're struggling with. I think this group can think big. I think we all know how to get the low-hanging fruit, and that's all good stuff. But what we can't do is think fast, move fast. So hope you'll stay in touch. There's a lot of different ways to get in touch with me. If you're not reading the blog, I certainly want to encourage you to do that. A little promotion there. But if you have ideas, comments, good or bad, send me an email. I think we have time for 1, 2. You want to wrap it up? Is that what I heard? Okay.
You emphasize the value of culture. Maybe it's a big topic, but can you give us a couple of tidbits to improve the culture or affect the culture as architects?
Yeah.
Because it's more important.
Yeah, here's the way to deal with culture. And I've been promoting a model around that, and to my surprise, everybody's yawning about it, so that's why I know it's a problem. I think the way to deal with culture is to break it down into its elements, and what you'll find if you look at your culture, we think of culture as this big amorphous, cloudy thing. We can break it down into its specific elements and say, oh, how does our culture work around collaboration? How does it work around authority? How does money move through the organization? What is the prevailing management approach to getting people to do things? Whatever those things are, what are the incentives? There's a whole bunch of stuff out here about culture and context we can go get an answer to. Then what we can do is look at that. Some of that will help me, and what I should be doing is leveraging that. And some of it will hurt me. And what I should be doing is building strategies to overcome that. So just a key on that is when you go in the corner and build a product and pronounce it on the world, you did not take into account your customer base. If what you do is understand your culture and what people like and what people will deal with, you can design a product that they will resonate with. But you need to start with understanding that.
We have time for 1 or 2 more.
Oh, come on, you got to have one more question. Silence. Okay. Beat you to death. All right. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot for listening. Again, think about it. That's what I want you to do is go home and think about it.